Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. It is your friend in flowers and business, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I'm really glad that you're here. And today I'm going to be sharing a little bit more than I normally do on something. And I think that vulnerability is really the secret to success, y'all, being willing to risk it, right? So let's get on with this. So today's episode is about flower farmer grit. And you'll kind of figure out what that's all about as we move through what I want to talk about today. And I couldn't decide on using the scrappy word, grit, or the more descriptive word, steadfast. And I decided to go with grit because that's really my word, right? Anywho, the successful folks in the flower farming arena aren't necessarily the ones that are the most educated, the most experienced, those that were the most equipped, meaning they had everything, or a lot of money to be able to get everything. It's that person literally that musters up the determination and combines it with a passion and then uses it to build a business that satisfies you, that leads to success, right? They're the people that have gone up against the odds and have started and built successful flower farming businesses because of what I call grit. And others may recognize it as determination, relentlessness, steadfastness. And what this whole podcast is about is that this is not something you're born with. It's a choice that you actually made. So the folks that I'm talking about are those that have this and practice it. They're the ones that can go call on, let's say, 5 customers with dismal results, no takers. And they get up the next day and the determination leads them to say, now I'm going to call on 10 customers today, and then 10 more the day after that, and 10 more the day after it. And then all of a sudden it happens. As they are practicing, they suddenly hit it. They get it, right? And the more comfortable and versed that you get, your customers see that, right? And then, but let's look at the flip side of that for a moment before I move on. Most people call on 5 customers that don't have any takers, and they go home defeated and deflated and think flowers don't sell well where I am. There's too many people, in the market. There's all kinds of reasons. And here's what I have to say about that. Baloney, y'all. Baloney. You haven't even scratched the tip of the iceberg or the surface, as they say. So what I want to help you see is how you can become number one, the person that has the determination to get up and hit it again the next day, right? So what can get you to hit the boards again and again the next day? And that is what I call grit, better known as determination and steadfastness. And please know that this is available to everyone. No matter the market or the situation, you can overcome when we put our mind to it. We can all choose to decide to do whatever it takes. And, to get the fortitude to keep on in light of anything. And I think it's also called gumption, y'all. And I think everybody probably has it. It has just been so buried and covered up that we've forgotten that it's there. We don't know how to use it, or we're so stinking terrified, right? Now, I guess I should probably mention that this doesn't mean that you're not going to still kick, cry, and scream along this journey. I'm not saying that all that goes away. It means that no matter if I am screaming or crying every day, I'm going to get up tomorrow and do it again. We are going to face the fear, whatever the fear is that leads to all of this uncertainness, right? And the impossible things today are grooming you for tomorrow. And I can really speak to this from so much firsthand experience. I think back to when I first started flower farming and, year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, when I was really isolated, y'all. We didn't even hardly have the internet. I know you're probably tired of hearing me say that, but that is the honest truth. I couldn't jump on social or DM somebody, much less text them and get an answer. I was really, really isolated. And I was so terrified so many times. And it's because of other lessons that I have since learned that, I created most of the problems I was facing from not knowing, right? So I just want to say the scary, deep things you're facing today are preparing you for tomorrow. And it doesn't really seem that way, right? When we face these incredible mountains, because what I often envision is a boulder that I am pushing up a mountain by myself. And it just really seems impossible. And this mountain or mountains, depending on what you're doing, the dark, scary times, they're just preparing you for greater things. And if you hit the boards again and again and again, in my experience, it is the scariest, hardest things that have the lessons that can change your business life. And I'm telling you, when this happens in your business life, it rolls over to your personal life too, right? So, how do we go about getting this grit or determination? And think about this for a moment. Practice, 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 just like an athlete or a pianist. But the problem is with us practicing, that means taking some hits, right? Getting the door slammed in our face or just negative things that make us just throw in the towel, more so than maybe a pianist that just can't master a particular piece of music yet. They just get frustrated. We get hurt when we try to practice. And that's what we have to learn how to overcome is that scariness and the hurtfulness, right? So what is so dadgum scary, right? And we each have our own dragons to face, right? And I think that I see two frequent flyers. I know that for me, I had firsthand experience with both of these. So I want to talk about just two of them. And number one is what I still see as the scariest thing. And that is starting any business, but particularly because we're talking about flower farming, starting a flower farming business on credit of any kind because you don't have the cash. And I just cannot emphasize enough, and I'm going to say it really clearly right here, the added pressure to create cash flow to make payments will paralyze you. It will paralyze you. And you're ended before you've even started. And this derails so many people. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole deep. It's because they think they need a bunch of stuff and to grow a lot of crops that are high investment out of the gate. And nothing could be further from the truth. And there is an easy solution to this problem. Do not do it. Do not do it, y'all, because I want to mention here that the problem with this, an additional problem, which you may not have even gotten to yet, is if you do this and you fail, as most people do in these circumstances, you don't just get to close up shop and decide that, oh, well, not doing that anymore. You then have this bill that has to be dealt with. And I'm thinking of one particular person that this happened to in my journey that I actually mentored. They came to me after the fact and they never made it out. They never, it just was the beginning of a real snowball problem. Face down now, raising the cash that you need, and it's not as much as you might think, and start with that piece that you can face all the other dragons that you have to when you focus on the other things in place of worrying about that payment and finding the money, right? You cannot even, anybody that's ever faced financial issues, you just know how it undermines everything. And it is no different in business. And it adds a level of fear and paralysis that you just have not even faced yet. Starting and running a business has enough challenges, fires to put out every single day to add a fire that you probably will never be able to put out if you start on that cycle. Don't do it. And you don't have to do it, right? You do not need as much cash to start a flower farming business as you think when you're following the wrong crowd of people, meaning people that don't necessarily haven't done it and been successful doing it, right? So it's just not necessary. So that is one scary thing that you can totally avoid, right? The second most scariest thing is one of my personal fears, and that is facing what people are saying and perhaps thinking about you. And oh my gosh, I mean, first off, seeing what they're saying about you is hard, but how our mind just runs with us on what we think they're thinking about us. So for me, this is where I was talking about just sharing some vulnerable things. So this is what led me to where I am today of having grit. So I had to face, before I could write books and do all these things that I'm doing, I had to start getting some grit. And it's because things you just don't even think about until you actually do them. When you write a book and then the publisher writes to you and say, okay, we're going to send your book to these well-established, brilliant people in your line of business, other flower farmers, gardeners, people that are influencers, those kind of things. Terrifying, y'all. Terrifying to think other people that are ahead of you, perhaps in your journey, that are going to be reading and offering up their 2 cents worth. Terrifying. And then when the book comes out, the readers, the people like you, how scary was that? Totally scary. And so then to move on even further, when I started a podcast, this podcast a couple of years ago, then to start reading the reviews. And I have to just tell you, this is the vulnerable part, y'all. So I had to start reading the reviews to really just start. First off, it's inspiration, right? But it only takes one stinker in a bushel basket to rot the whole thing, in your mind anyway. That's the way I used to be before I got grit. I would read hundreds of 5-star, just affirming, great reviews until you got to one that wasn't so great. It's a 1-star. And they went on and said things like, I talk about my dog too much. and that I ramble. And y'all, it cut me to my knees. And that review is what really got me facing the fear of what other people are saying or thinking about me. Because guess what? Everybody's got an opinion, right? And that's the attitude I had to start thinking, oh, well, they got an opinion. I got an opinion. We all have opinions, right? I just had to start facing it down and reading them. And how did I do that? I submerged myself amongst people that support me and our business with words of truth and support, you know, and to hear somebody say to me, Lisa, that's just one review out of hundreds of good ones, right? And it just toughened me up. And what it did is it helped me to face the fear and realize it didn't kill me, y'all. What what is the problem with people having their own opinion? It doesn't matter what they think. It just does not matter. And it prepared me this whole journey of facing scary things and facing the fears. And I'll tell you something else. This reminds me of a story, speaking of dogs. Back when I worked at the veterinary hospital where I was the business manager, I moved up from receptionist through the ranks to actually basically run the business, was there for 18 years. And I can remember back in the early days, and for anybody that's worked at a veterinary hospital, they totally understand this. It's after a holiday weekend, which means your boarding is packed. Business is just off the rails. The phone is ringing endlessly. There's people in the waiting room because everybody's got sick dogs from the holiday weekend, people picking up dogs, waiting in line in front of you because it is so dadgum busy. Not everything is perfect in the way the records are written on and the charges, and it just takes forever to do anything, right? And oh my gosh. So we had a catastrophe. When I'm talking about is bookkeeping, back in the kennel. Something didn't get done that was supposed to have been done to a dog, like getting his nails done or something, right? And it's with an owner that is very irritable always, much less under these circumstances. And you're back in the back. You go back to get the dog, and this isn't done. And you're kind of fearful to go out front and tell them. And so you call a powwow of the people in the kennel, like, how did this happen? And then the person at the front desk is coming back to say, like, why, where's the dog? The lady's out front waiting. And you're having this little quick powwow while, all heck is breaking loose out front, right? Because it's just busy. And Dr. H walks back and says, what in the heck is going on here? And we proceed in our, gibberish ways to tell him what's going on. He said, wait, stop. Did anybody die? We all look at each other and say, no. He said, then let's just move on and get over this. And that's like what I think of now when I face these things that seem so scary and terrifying, is I think to myself, I see him standing there looking at all of us girls just in total panic. And he says, did anybody die from this? No? Fine. Let's move on. That's what I think of. And maybe that'll help you, right? This has toughened me up to prepare for something that I didn't do in our business for a long time that I should have, because we've just done it and it has provided us with invaluable information. And that is to ask our people, you guys, to tell us what you think of us and what you want for us. And that was in form of a survey we did earlier this year. And we had just hundreds and hundreds of replies, and we thank you all so much. But let me tell you something. I could have never faced doing that if I hadn't started with these baby steps, reading social media comments that maybe weren't so favorable, or facing reading reviews that aren't 5-star. Baby steps, y'all, baby steps. And I practice and I practice, and I gained grit and determination, reading those ugly things, which, you know what? And you want something else? Sometimes people don't really mean them in an ugly way. We just take them that way. But then I remember, oh, well, we all have opinions and move on. We have to get over this hump. And what got me over this hump, what built my grit and determination, it was surrounding myself with those people that have their eye on the same ball as me, the same prize, the goal, the mission, that are supportive. They aren't um, driven by jealousy. And I say that you might not think that yet in some of the groups that you're in, but it's something for you to keep in mind. Everybody can seek out a supportive group or community or a mentor, but sometimes that's going to mean leaving folks behind that aren't really supportive of business, that really truly have their eye on the same ball. I can remember back when I launched the Gardener's Workshop as what it is today, which was actually in 2005 when I went from being just a flower farm to add all these other things. One of the things I had to give up, I was a huge novel reader up until that point. One of the first things I had to give up to say, okay, I have to stop reading novels because I have so much business knowledge that I need to gain. I'm going to have to read that kind of stuff. Sometimes you have to give up things that don't appear to be misleading you, but at the very least, they aren't pushing you forward in whatever your goal is. And that's not always obvious, and it'll come in time, right? Sometimes we find ourselves in festering groups of folks that aren't really helping us. I often say to my students, because I see them sometimes facing a trouble, whether it's a pest, a business problem, a customer problem, a growing problem, whatever it is. And I see them asking other people that are in the same spot they are or even further behind them. Why even waste your breath and time? I'm a hustler, y'all. Time, we all have the same 24 hours. I want to be the most effective in my time. Why would we ask people that know no more than we do? You ask people that are ahead of you, right? And that's what I started looking at and evaluating is I want to be amongst people that are ahead of me. And in fact, what I learned about some of the groups that I was in is that my peers, people that were either at the same level or behind me, they want me just to stay where I am too. They weren't really about me moving forward meant that they were then behind, right? And that just brings out kind of craziness in people, y'all. And so these people were planting doubts in me and do the opposite of finding determination and grit. So mustering up and finding grit and cultivating it all comes down to a choice. Do I really want to start and build a flower farming business? If so, how can I put myself into those circumstances that actually cultivate that instead of like literally tearing it down little bit by little bit? My mission has become through this last decade is to inspire others to carry forward a legacy of this can-do power for generations to come, right? Because it's a choice, y'all. That's what we have to understand. It's not that Lisa was born this way. I was not born this way, y'all. I had to make a choice to seek it out and cultivate it. It's not a birthright or a circumstance. I've built the Gardener's Workshop on these terms to be the place that aspiring flower farmers and those that are already in the ditches and those dreamers that think they want to do this, a place that they can come for support and knowledge that builds this grit and determination to face the dragons of a flower farming business. And y'all, that's in every business. Flower farming just has its own unique, and I cannot teach you on every single scary thing that you're going to face, but I can support and guide you on how to face fear and how you react to that. And I'll leave you with this thought, so frequent, that scary, fearful thing that you have to face when you finally make the decision to put your foot out and dip your toe into it, all of a sudden that mile-wide ocean is only an inch deep. There was really nothing to be afraid of to begin with. We just have to build our grit and determination. All right, friends, I'm going to leave it with that. It's your choice, and I would love to walk alongside you as you dig up your grit and determination. Ciao.